if you look at the contrast between the policies, between the record, by the way, one of Biden's best points was when he said all of these attacks back and forth about my family and his family, they don't matter. What matters is your family. That may have been Biden's best moment, actually.
So you don't believe voters are moved by the Hunter Biden stuff?
I don't think it moves a single voter.
Huh.
And I'm glad. Look, I think that, what was it, about 10, 15 minutes where they were slamming each other's families and going back and forth. I think that was kind of...
You think that was a wash, basically?
That I don't see as moving votes significantly.
Look, this is not about Hunter Biden. The hard drive from hell is about Joe Biden. This shows you how Joe Biden's been compromised by the Chinese Communist Party financially. I mean, and there's going to be more emails coming out today, more deals with the Chinese Communist Party by a host of news sites. They're going to be putting them up all day directly from the hard drive and not refuted at all by any of the parties. In fact, tonight on Fox News, you're going to have Tucker Carlson's going to be out with Bobulinski again with recordings and direct conversations he had with Joe Biden. Joe Biden right now, Maria, is in the witness protection program. The reason he's not on the campaign trail is not simply the fact he doesn't have a closing argument and he doesn't have the energy. They're hiding him because they understand that any question by the press at all, he has no answer for. This is only going to get worse. And the tech oligarchs are trying to suppress this information with how they do searches. But it's exploding, and it's particularly exploding if you look at the targeted searches. It's exploding exactly in the parts of the country the Biden campaign does not want. People are thirsting for this information. They want to make a fully thought-through decision. This is now a referendum on Joe Biden and his character, right? And what he's done with the Chinese Communist Party in selling us out, selling working-class people out. So this is going to be, I think, in the last 7 days of this campaign, as you know, Trump's the best closer we've ever had. He's making a closing argument. Joe Biden's in hiding. If Joe Biden comes out, the first thing he has to address is being compromised, not just corruption. It's corruption that led to compromise by our greatest enemy, and that is the Chinese Communist Party.
You see, if you listen to the War Room every day, you get that. You get that in spades. You know, Maria Bartiromo. I'm giving it. That's where I'm giving it to the Wall Street crowd. Welcome. It's Tuesday, 27 October, year of our Lord 2020. 1 week from today, the most important election in the history of the Republic, and that comes from 250 flag officers who sent that letter to President Trump. It's got to be 7 weeks ago. John Fredericks Radio Network, Real America's Voice. Rob Sigg, Howard Diamond, the team over there doing an amazing job. The content with John Solomon, Raheem Kassam, they have really made a powerhouse. Punch way above their weight. I love people who punch above their weight. Dish Channel 219, Comcast Channel 113 in Chicago, Newsmax TV all over the United States, Newsmax, 70 million homes, Chris Ruddy. Of course, G News and GTV, which are blowing up. I think G News, I saw yesterday, is doing 10 or 12 million page views a day. This is it's explosive. I would definitely say that is the New York Press. That is tabloid Chinese journalism, right? We're seeing that is the New York Post in Mandarin with an edge, tabloid with an edge. Just go to the site. If you do nothing else, just look at the pictures. So we're going to have Joe Hoff from Gateway Pundit, big breaking news on the Gateway. Jack Posobiec from One America is going to join us about Philadelphia, major riot there last night. 12 police officers hospitalized. I want to go to Ted Cruz. Let's go to War Room and go to something that's very important about the Republican Party and where it goes from here. Ted Cruz is a fabulous guy, great guy. Was really the last man standing in the 2016 primary. But this is why he's not the presidential candidate in 16. This is why he's not president. This is why it's called not getting it at a very fundamental level. Remember, President Trump actually went and mocked Biden a few seconds later because Ted Cruz goes, "That's the best line he had, your family." That is a standard stock phony political line. That's what a political consultant puts in guys like Ted Cruz's head. And he goes, "Oh, no, when I'm getting attacked, I'm going to pivot and say it's about your family." And Trump mocked Biden. He goes, "That's just a political line." The age of populism and nationalism is not about being a phony. It's about giving it to you with the bark on, okay? Actually, I guess in this regard, give it to you with the bark off. Give it to you the real way. So, and then jump in here, but also, Ted, it's not about. He has their family. It's not about Ivanka and Jared versus Hunter Biden. This is not about Hunter Biden. And I understand, Ted, your wife still works at Goldman Sachs or somehow associated with Goldman Sachs. And I used to work at Goldman Sachs back when it was a private partnership and the greatest investment bank in the world, which it is not today, right? But this is about selling us out to the Chinese Communist Party. And Ted, you're just not looking at the numbers correctly. It's changing votes, right? It's changing votes, particularly Senator Cruz, working class Catholics in places like Wisconsin, in places like random places like Northeast Pennsylvania. And it's going to change a lot of votes because there's a lot more to come. And in fact, I want to know if Ted's going to be saying that after Tucker Carlson tonight. Tucker Carlson's going to have Bo Belinsky on there to blow up, exact recordings. National Pulse is breaking massive news, real audio in Hunter Biden's voice, and National Pulse is going to be breaking it all day. Remember, this thing has 25,000 images. It's got 40,000 emails and texts. It has 5 hours of audio, and you hear it in Hunter Biden's own voice, in his partner's own voice. And there's some stuff in the audio, and they have not come back. And the reason they're not coming back and saying it's Russia thing, they know. The guys that are coming back are other guys on his email chains that are blowing us up and going, please, no, we'll sign an affidavit. No more. Jack Maxey and the team over Revolver, an explosive story coming out of the Revolver.
And a big shout out to everyone who's out there. There's this company called Eudora Global. Eudora Global is, in my mind, basically a sham company for the benefit of princelings of, shall we say, the left side of the street. Somebody needs to look into this. I was contacted a few days ago by somebody in Latin America concerning Ocho Global, their gaming operation down there. Did Harry Reid or Joe Biden potentially do any lobbying on behalf of Ocho Rio Gaming with Latin American countries? Big question mark.
Tons of stuff. I want to go before we bring Bill McGinley. We got the one and the only Bill McGinley. What he was telling you 3 months ago, Nancy Pelosi is doing today. We're going to get into all the legal, breaking tons of news here. What is National Pulse? This is what I love about National Pulse. Exactly what I love about Natalie Winters because she does all the work. But they go into it's like a new man. You used to always know. You went actually into the audio.
Yeah.
And tell the audience about the audio overall.
I'll quote from one of the titles of the audio pieces. It's the most genius S ever is Hunter Biden's title of some of his voice memos. So we're going to roll out his most genius S ever today. You can hear it for yourselves. But I just want to go back to Ted Cruz for a second, Steve, before this. I don't know if anybody knows this Madison Sinclair Record, some kind of legal journal, right? And they run an editorial from their team, their editorial board, last October 2019. And they say this: after nearly 50 years in elective office, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has accumulated a large collection of folksy and phony personal narratives that he rehashes whenever he feels the need to remind voters what an unpretentious regular guy he is. A favorite is the one about how, just like us, he sits with the family around the dinner table at night fretting about the bills that need to be paid. Sure he does. This is a guy who plagiarized his way through law school and then served 2 years on a county council in Delaware before getting elected to U.S. Senate at the age of 30. The man has never held a real job or worked an honest day in his life. Somehow, however, during 5 decades of public service, he became a millionaire. As we are now learning, his son Hunter got rich without really working, trading on dad's position and influence and intercession as senator and VP. Sweetheart deals in Ukraine and China are the most glaring examples. There are plenty of others, foreign and domestic. So how does Ted Cruz get suckered into one of these folksy and phony stories?
No, and led into it by Jonathan Swan, who is smart as it is, just led you down that path. Remember, this is the difference between populism, nationalism, and old school establishment republicanism. No, Ted. Note to self, and have your consultants write this down. The phoniest line of the entire night. And by the way, even the focus group said that. And Trump attacks him for, oh, no, I'm being attacked. It's not your family. It's not my family. It's your family, right? So it's so phony, so stupid. And how you could repeat that is redonkulous. Also, connect the dots. As I said on Maria today, right? This is the difference of the industrial logic of the Biden. This is not about Hunter Biden. Take Hunter Biden out of your mind. It's not Hunter versus Ivanka, right? It's not Hunter versus Jared. That's not what this is about. As I said on Maria, you wouldn't see this problem because the Trump family and the extended family are patriots, real patriots. Not somebody sends your drug junkie son into the Navy, gun deck him in there, right, that he can then, basically sell or distribute drugs to enlisted men. That's why the Navy, you understand something, Joe Biden. The Navy detests you. They were waiting. The very first time your hapless son shows up to a naval base in Norfolk, Virginia to report for duty, they drug test him. It's got to be the first time in history.
I have a little question about this, too, okay? This guy's a 43-year-old lawyer, and he gets an appointment to the Navy. My impression when we used to watch those guys at OCS, the 3-week guys who should learn how to salute and march around.
Yep.
Guy with a lawyer degree, I think he at least would be a JG. Now, here's the real
He'd also be a JAG. He'd run a JAG officer. He was a PAO.
Yeah, here's the key thing that I want to know. We have to believe that our own intelligence services knew everything about Hunter Biden's behavior.
100%.
Did DNI or did DIA tip off the Navy about his
Joe
behaviors?
Biden's got to come forward and say everything about gun decking his son and jeopardizing hardworking kids. My daughter, West Point grad, who served in Iraq when Joe Biden was not getting the forces of a forces agreement there. Right, they had to pull out in the middle of nowhere, left all that equipment there because Joe Biden wouldn't close the deal because he's not a closer. You're right. What did intelligence know? What did they know? What did DIA, what did Defense Intelligence know about the drug use of Joe Biden? Joe, you're going to have to come out of the hole eventually and stand and deliver for the American people. Okay, let's bring in Bill McGinley. We got to get to McGinley. McGinley's now, we've made McGinley, this is what we do. We make people stars. Now we're jammed for time because he's got to go to Newsmax later. Right? McGinley, come on here. You got a couple minutes. Just give us an overview from when you were last on and telling us about the lawfare part of the Transition Integrity Project was going to be everything. We got about 2 minutes in this segment. Just give us a snapshot of where we are today with a week to go.
Okay. So when we talked last time, these court cases were in the lower district courts at the federal level, but also in the state courts. Last night, we got a decision out of the United States Supreme Court, even though Justice Barrett had not been sworn in yet and didn't participate. And this had to do with the ballot receiving deadlines in Wisconsin. And the Supreme Court threw out the Democratic attempt to add an extra 6 days. And the reason that they did it, Justice Kavanaugh drafted the plurality opinion there. And basically what he said was that Article 2 of the United States Constitution vests the authority to change and prescribe the manner of elections to the state legislatures. Federal courts don't have that authority under the Constitution to just start rewriting the election laws. And when we come back from the break, maybe we can talk about some of the interesting back and forth between Kagan and Kavanaugh, but also there's an interesting tell in there about Justice Roberts. But what this means is I think that the Democratic Party's really concerned about Pennsylvania. Because remember that one went up and it was a 4-4 split. Justice Roberts went with the liberals to not overturn a lower court opinion favoring the Republicans. They're worried this case is going to go back up, and ultimately the Republican Party is going to prevail on some of the ballot measures that the courts have been fooling with down in Pennsylvania.
Bill, just hang on.
So there's a lot going on.
Hang on. We're going to come back, get into all the details. Okay, Miles goes taking us out every day. And we're also going to play the U.S. premiere of the entire video will be played at the end of this. I love this song. Fight for Hong Kong. I get all jacked up when I listen to this. Hashtag War Room Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
I just want to make sure everybody understands we love Ted Cruz. Just trying to make Ted a little more populist, a little more economic nationalist here. Remember, that's not a good line. Your family, that's a phony political line. Okay, and remember, the industrial logic of this is they monetize access to Joe Biden. That's the family's business model. And now you're seeing it in living color. Not one person has refuted one email, not one text message, and not one photo. And later today on National Pulse, you're going to have the audio. Hunter Biden in his own voice. Hunter Biden in his own voice. And I got to tell you, you're starting off with the nice ones.
That's true.
You're starting off with the nice ones, but they get a little, how do I say? I don't say kinky. Did I say that? Did I say that? More later. Okay, I want to turn now back to Bill McGinley. Bill, walk us through the Supreme Court. Tell us about the back and forth. What's the tells of Roberts? And then I want you to give us how important glorious ACB is.
Sure. So from the decision last night, as typically happens in some of these decisions on important issues, the justices will actually fight it out in the footnotes. And so Justice Kavanaugh takes the very textualist view by saying, look, Article 2 of the United States Constitution vests the authority to prescribe the manner of elections in the state legislatures. Doesn't say the governor, doesn't say the Secretary of State, doesn't say the state courts, doesn't say the federal courts. It says the state legislatures. If there's going to be a change in the voting system in a state, it has to come from there. Kagan, on the other hand, takes on Kavanaugh by saying, hey, wait a minute, what we need to do is we need to be looking to protect as many votes as possible, and the federal courts have a role to play in looking at this to make sure that we're not disenfranchising people who otherwise should be eligible to vote. And she says the federal courts should actually take this activist role. So you have Kavanaugh, who has taken the strict interpretation of the founder's intent by saying, look, Article 2 is very clear. State legislatures have this authority. If you're not a state legislature, you don't get to change it. Courts get to interpret it, but you don't get to change it. Kagan says, on the liberal wing, says, no, wait a minute, the federal courts have a role. And then John Roberts kind of comes up and splits the middle. And what he says, because remember, he sided with the liberals in the Pennsylvania decision, he says, I agree with Justice Kavanaugh in terms of federal courts not rewriting the election laws. And he votes with the Kavanaugh wing and Gorsuch wing and Thomas and Alito on this Wisconsin case because it was an appeal from the federal courts. But he says, wait a minute, when it comes to an appeal from a state Supreme Court, I take a different view. And I think that their interpretations of their state constitutions and how they apply their election laws should be given some weight, crystallizing why he voted with the liberals in the Pennsylvania. So ACB's ascension as an associate justice on the United States Supreme Court is really a seismic event for this election, in the sense that if she adopts the Kavanaugh interpretation of the Constitution, meaning she strictly reads Article 2 and says, you can change election laws, but it has to be through the legislative process performed by the state legislatures as opposed to the courts, this will basically pull back some of the victories that the Democrats have had if there's appeals to the Supreme Court. If she adopts the Roberts line of reasoning, appeals that the Supreme Court receives from the state Supreme Courts will probably be given more deference than appeals from the lower courts in the federal system. And so it's going to be interesting to see where she comes out. I think she's a strict textualist. I think ACB really is somebody who is going to be welcome on this court because she's going to restore the balance of power by making sure that the Supreme Court performs the function it was intended to do, and that is to interpret the laws, not make the laws, but also to ensure that the laws that are adopted comply with the Constitution and not try to rewrite them.
Let's go back to Pennsylvania, get down to the you're saying, you've been telling me this for a while, the Democrats are concerned about Pennsylvania. Are they concerned about the timing of it? Are they concerned about this two envelope where you actually have to have, and remember, ladies and gentlemen, when you're looking at polling, remember, we're not talking about who's going to vote on game day versus who's going to mail it in, because these mail-ins, and I'm hearing out of Pennsylvania, guys are talking 15 or 20% may not be certifiable. Walk us through where we stand right now with this situation in Pennsylvania, Bill McGinley.
Sure. So looking up the latest vote totals on U.S. election projection, which is a website, I hope I got that right, run by a professor out of Florida. As of this morning, he's reporting the total number of early votes, and mail-in plus in-person, is 1,712,007 votes. That breaks down 355,000 and change for Republicans and 1,193,000 and change for Democrats. Of that, 311 ballots have been rejected out of the mail-in pile. So if you look at the rejection if you look at the rejection percentage, it's way below 15-20%. Most of them are being accepted. Now, they may not. Pennsylvania, I believe, is one of the states that's not going to start opening the outer envelopes until the close of the polls on Election Day. So that number will probably increase due to one of the things we've heard a lot about is the naked ballots, which are people who mail in their absentee ballot, don't include the inner security envelope, which is basically the affidavit that provides the election official with the information necessary to confirm that you are indeed a registered voter and to do the signature match and everything else. So, that number could go higher. But what this says is that a lot of people are voting, and it's a significant number with a very low rejection rate based on what they've received thus far, overwhelmingly Democratic. One other thing that I would point out, Steve, and you and I kind of texted about this, somebody did a poll of the people who have already voted, and Joe Biden is up with the voters who have already early voted or mailed in their ballots. But President Trump is up with the people who have yet to vote, who intend to vote, which means, as we've talked about for months, this is a turnout game. This is a get out the vote game. This is turning bodies out to the polls and making sure that people are prepared. If there's a problem, you are going to stay in line. You're not going to leave the line if you're waiting for 1, 2, 4, 9 hours to cast that ballot. That ballot is too important. We've talked about this for 4 to 5 months. Vote, vote, vote. And don't just vote, just don't have you vote. Call your friends and neighbors and get them out to the polls as well. This election is way too important.
Where do we stand legally? I know there's big controversy about how many days, when it has to be postmarked, how they're going to count, when they're going to count. Where do we stand in the legal process in Pennsylvania?
They're trying they filed a cert petition with the U.S. Supreme Court. The Democrats are trying to revisit the decision, a couple of other decisions on signature mismatch and other things. The Republicans are intervening to make sure that their voices are heard on this. Look, this litigation scrum between the Republicans and the Democrats like-minded outside group allies, with all of the litigation that they are going to file, is going to continue right up to Election Day and beyond Election Day if this thing is close. There's going to be no shortage of court cases throughout the United States in these battleground states, whether it's Florida, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. You can see them pop up in Iowa. You may even have some in Maine because they do it by congressional district, or Nebraska because they do it by congressional district. These guys are going to scratch and claw for every single advantage that they can try to gain through the court system and then try to run out the clock. So that basically there's detrimental reliance, and the courts are going to be reluctant to change the rules of the game on Election Day or after Election Day. Their calculus is, if we can run out the clock with some of the court decisions that we've received, the courts are going to be loath to go back and throw out ballots because they didn't comply with the new deadline that's imposed on Election Day or after Election Day. So if anything, you might see a number of emergency filings in some of the states where the Democrats feel that they can actually try and gain an additional advantage, which means that this battlefield could expand depending upon how the Biden campaign feels about their turnout operation and their potential path for victory, if they feel they can have it. And let's face it, I think everybody agrees the president is gaining ground. The president is turning the corner on this. This is getting closer and closer. And if he is able to keep the momentum going, the question is going to be, can he overtake Joe Biden in these battleground states before and on Election Day? And that's why, if you haven't voted yet, if you're a deplorable, you need to basically clear the field on your calendar and get out there and vote on Election Day.
Before we go, we're going to go to break in a second. Just one question. We got about a minute left. As you see it right now, you still believe, as you and Raheem have talked about now for going on 3 months, that this President Trump will be leading on game day, but as you see it with this mass of mail-in votes, that this will go into some sort of overtime and be slugged out in canvassing rooms and then in courtrooms?
Yeah, look, I think we're going to know on election night whether we're going to end up in a protracted process of post-election administrative and court litigation. And I think, some of the states that have a history of actually being able to get the returns in early, such as Florida and Georgia and Arizona and some of the others, if President Trump is winning those states, I think it lays the groundwork that we're going to be in for a very long process. If he falls in one of those, we're going to know pretty early that it's game, set, match for Joe Biden, which is why I can't say it enough, Steve. You got to get out there and vote. You can't be the guy or gal that wakes up on November 4th and say, God, if I just would have made a couple of hours to go cast that ballot, maybe it would have been a different result in my state. No regrets. You've got to get out there and be forward leaning and get out there and make sure that you cast your ballot.
Hang on for a second, Bill. We're going to take a short break, bring you back. Remember, Bill McGinley's message, no whining, no tears, okay? Everybody out in this audience is a force multiplier. And if you want the Bernie bros to come in, we just want you to completely embrace exactly what the Biden, access machine does in selling you out to the Chinese Communist Party. Back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Bill McGinley was cabinet secretary in the first couple of years of the Trump administration, partner at Holtzman Vogel, one of the top election lawyers around, brilliant, has over the last several months walked us through what the problem is going to be. As we get down to it, absolutely everything, every shot he's called has been absolutely correct. Raheem's been all over this, the Transition Integrity Project. But Bill McGinley, this is where I pride ourselves, giving you the signal, not the noise. If you watched this show 3 months ago, you heard all about this. I want to go now, Bill. What are the 2 or 3 things out there people should understand you're worried about, or lawsuits you see coming up through the system that people should put on their, should duly note?
We should be watching all the lawsuits that are trying to throw out the signature match verification process or the witness requirement for mail-in or absentee ballots. These are just foundational ways to verify that the voter who claims to have cast the ballot is indeed that individual. Because every election law is about preserving voter intent. Before you get the voter intent, there has to be some minimum safeguards to ensure that the intent being expressed on the ballot is indeed the voter who claims he or she is. This is not vote suppression tactics. These are just basic safeguards that every state, most states have in the system passed by their state legislatures. So looking at those two, the other ones are going to be continued lawsuits in the state courts trying to extend the absentee ballot receipt deadline. The reason that I'm worried about this is if we have a very close contest, say in Pennsylvania, I think the Democrats are going to try and leverage some of the extremely long ballot receipt deadlines that they've achieved in other states and try and say, why are these votes counting, but the ones in Pennsylvania are not? Kind of an equal protection argument. I think that they're going to try and use that to try and get additional ballots in under ballot harvesting, where there may not be any sort of safeguard to ensure that those ballots were cast on or before Election Day. And finally, I'm very concerned about these court decisions out of Pennsylvania where they set up these satellite locations to receive ballots, but they're denying the candidates and the parties the opportunity to have observers there just to witness the process. Not to do anything, not to play an active role, but just to witness the process. Transparency is the key for building confidence in the election process. There should be full sunshine on everything that happens in connection with this election, because it's the only way that once we get a certified result out of a state, everybody has the confidence that the process was fair, that every valid ballot was counted, and that people can have confidence in the results. When you try to pull the curtain on some of these activities, all it does is just make room for unfounded rumors. The election officials in the state of Pennsylvania need to understand transparency is the key to successful election administration.
Trust the transparent process. That's what we got to do. By the way, the fight is going to be on this. I realize we're getting down to what's important. This is all about voter turnout. This is all about getting low propensity voters, what they call sporadic voters, to the polls for both sides. This is about the grind of the courts, the lawfare. This is not sexy. It's not easy, but we're not here to entertain you. Although we will have some entertainment later, because the more salacious parts of the of Hunter Biden, his thing keep coming up. We're going to have that later. Joe Hoff, we got Raheem Kassam, others, but we're going through the grind that's going to make a difference in your life. You're the first guy, McGinley, that really said, "Hey, look, the tripwire to get all this done is the safe harbor on the 8th of December." And you've got the Electoral College meets in the state capitals with the electors if they get elected, if they get put forward on the 14th. Only basically the Democrats, the Supreme Court and the Democratic Party conceding in the Supreme Court ruling saved it in 2000 when it was 5 counties and a handful of votes. Here you got a battleground. You got 60 maybe million mail-in votes. It'll be chaotic, right? If it goes into overtime. But you're the first one to say, you know what? If this goes past election night, you could be going to the House of Representatives in January in a historic 1876 type scenario. And Nancy Pelosi, who I know her staff watches, they draft off Madeline Peltz and watch the show, have been all over this since you first mentioned it. Bill, walk us through this concept of the contingent election for the President of the United States.
Sure. So if the election gets thrown to the House of Representatives because no candidate achieves 270 electoral votes, then the United States House of Representatives will be the body who selects the next president. The thing is about the contingent election in the House is that the votes are taken by state. So it's one state, one vote. It's not one member, one vote. And that means that California, the most populous state in the nation, is equal to one vote in that contingent election, same as Montana, one of the least populous states. That means that you need to start looking at the state delegations to figure out who has a majority of the representatives in each state delegation. Right now, the Republicans control 26, which means they have the majority. It's a majority vote. And also, there's a 2/3 quorum requirement for them to even be able to get to that vote. So after we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the president referenced it in a rally in Pennsylvania. But also, Nancy Pelosi actually sent out a solicitation for a Democratic super PAC talking about the need to flip some of these state delegations as an insurance policy to make sure that Donald Trump does not get a second term. The Democrats are looking at a multidimensional chessboard here, and they're trying to game out all the various scenarios and opportunities that they have to prevent the president from achieving a second term. That means they're looking at the contingent election process in the House of Representatives. They're looking at the objection process for the January 6th tallying and tabulation and certification of the electoral vote process. And they're looking at all of the state rules that they can use to try and deny President Trump 270 electoral votes to try and get their electoral slates certified to Congress by December 8th, so that on December 14th, it's all Democrats. One other thing that we haven't really talked about, and this is an interesting little wrinkle and something that people also need to start paying attention to. You remember in 2000 and in 2020, the Supreme Court actually upheld the state laws preventing faithless electors, meaning those electors who pledge that they're for Donald Trump are required to vote for Donald Trump. They can either be fined or replaced. Same thing with those for Joe Biden. There's about 15 states, I think, is the number, which means we've got 35 states out there with no mechanism to ensure that those electors actually vote the will of the people in their state.
This is going to be
so
huge.
If this thing gets as close as we're talking about,
no, this is going to be huge.
One of the biggest things that we're going to be looking at is going to be who are these electors that are not bound by state law to vote for the winner in their state?
I got to jump
and
in.
You're going to see massive
this is going to be another huge one. Write this down in your book, the audience, because remember, Trump, we won 306. I think we got 304. But everybody says, oh, but Steve and Bill, I thought the Supreme Court ruled on that, so that's not a problem. What's your answer to that, McGinley? Everybody says, oh, no, the Supreme Court, Roberts' court ruled on that. You can't have that again. You can't have the faithless electors that Trump would have really gotten his 306. What say you, sir?
It's up to the state legislatures. Many of the states have not prescribed rules to ensure that the electors vote the will of the people. which means you could have faithless electors in any number of states, which is why, this is the multidimensional chess, right? This is why you're not only getting voters out to the polls and making sure that they cast their ballots, but you're also making sure that their votes are protected through lawfare. You are looking at the House of Representatives in the election there in case you go to a contingent election. But immediately following Election Day, you're going to start seeing whip operations pop up for the Trump and Biden campaigns to start looking at those electors that are in states that are not bound by state statute to absolutely vote the way, required to vote the way that their states vote. This has really never caused a problem in the past, to my understanding. I think that there are any number of electors that have broken faith with their voters and voted for somebody else, but usually it's in a scenario where it doesn't matter. It's almost like a protest or a symbolic vote. This is something that could be one of the big issues that we have that nobody's really talking about following this election.
Okay, last thing. I want to put you on the spot here because I know you're very close to many of the people working on this. And this is not a criticism. I just want an observation from somebody that the audience thinks very highly of, and you've been so brilliant about this. When you look at the left, and after you and Raheem, after you had the transition integrity, and after you came on the show a couple of times, surprise, surprise. Remember, there's no conspiracy, but there are no coincidences. Surprise, surprise, the New York Times, a couple of days later, had a huge piece that obviously got triggered from us talking about it, about the 800 elite lawyers, Mark Elias, Perkins Coie, the whole team, ex-solicitor generals, ex-U.S. attorneys, and, Eric Holder, Barack Obama's personal, basically, enforcer, right? And this super team of lawyers. As I've seen since that time, they're making strategic moves on doing things like you mentioned the first thing about Minnesota, the congressional district where the marijuana candidate, who is at 0.0001% dies, and you said, hey, that's going to kick it into the, that ties basically, if we went up in the iron range, that ties the delegation, that moves it from 26-23 to 1 to 26-22 2, right? Wrong direction. They're already in court, 5 days later. As we sit here today, compare and contrast the strategic moves the Democrats are doing versus the strategic moves the Republican lawfare or lawyers are doing.
I think the Democrats have a lot of very talented lawyers and a lot of money to go out and throw a lot of mud against the wall in these battleground states to see whatever advantage they can achieve in the courts that they couldn't achieve in the state legislatures. I think it's why you've seen well over 200 court cases filed across the country by the Democrats and their like-minded outside groups. I think Republicans are playing the weight game and are taking those cases, contesting them, devoting $20 million to financing the lawfare defense against all of these court cases the Democrats are filing, but really kind of counting on the federal judiciary to step in and restore order and prevent the chaos from this. With last night's decision from Justice Kavanaugh, we're beginning to see some of the seeds of order being restored in these election processes in some of these important states. The question's going to be, is there enough time for the Supreme Court and the federal courts to restore order to the process with all of these different lawsuits that have been filed by the Democrats that are frankly creating some fairly chaotic regimes out there? It's a question of timing and of resources. I think our guys are doing a great job. Fully support them. They need to keep up the fight. Don't sleep. Just continue to fight and try and get this done. But they're up against a lot of money and a lot of lawyers.
McGinley, you're a superstar. Give us your Twitter handle. How do people follow you throughout the day?
Sure, I'm at WJ McGinley. That's WJMCGINLEY on Twitter.
Okay, brother. Thank you very much, Bill McGinley from Holtzman Vogel. And I got to tell you, a guy we're going to have on hopefully every day from now on until up. Always signal, not noise. But I must say, in summary of these first three with the lawyers, all hail glorious ACB. If you don't think that's providential, you're not a believer. She is beyond a rock star. All hail glorious ACB as we now put order versus chaos. Led by Justice Kavanaugh, a Trump appointee. Followed by ACB, glorious ACB. If you're an establishment Republican, if you've gotten suckered into the Lincoln Project, right, the guys in the Lincoln Project, look in the mirror. Order versus chaos. Order versus chaos. We're going to be back talking about chaos. We're going to go to Philadelphia, Posobiec next.
Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room. Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
We also got huge pandemic news. I mean, the pandemic, we got to get to everything here in the States, Europe, all of that. We'll do that in the second hour with our resident doctor, Dr. Jack Maxey. But I want to go first, before we bring Posobiec in about Philadelphia. You're a Wall Street guy. You're a deal guy. Maxey, I got to tell you, this hard drive is insane. The financial crimes, the double dealing, the backstabbing of good institutions, the drafting off of it's. I know you've been living in this for 7 or 8 days. Do you have to take a break every couple hours, go take a hot shower?
Man, you got to wash yourself. And I will tell you, some of the stuff is so disturbing that I actually feel like there's darkness around me when I'm reading it. They are such energetic grifters, criminals, liars. They betray all of each other all the time.
I'm going to tell you, at the end of the day, when this all, and by the way, it's going to go on forever, win, lose, or draw in the third. I think you're going to have to weigh and measure what was more repulsive, the sexual depravity in the drugs or the financial. I happen to think it's going to end up financial.
I think it's going to end up being the financial.
Because you're screwing over Lao Beijing, you're screwing over Africa.
For example, some stuff that they didn't get into the article, but they're going to follow up with, I hope,
revolver?
is, you've got this person in China who's their sort of handler and contacting them, talking about how they've got this inside scoop on this auction in Europe. This is the thing. From unverified and unverifiable sources, we understand the following. Entities participated in the bidding rounds for the Sinopec deal, but for whatever reason did not end up as investors. In the end, 25 entities were selected for only 30% stake, valued at $17 billion US. This is the kind of money we're talking about, people. Please note that this information should be conveyed as verbal cues only. And then she mentions KKR, TPG, PAG, Citic Capital, Canada Pension Club, Saudi Aramco.
Joe Biden, my son did nothing wrong. This is the problem, Joe. It's called letting no discipline, no order, not being raised. Don't want to step in and criticize a parent for raising a child, but let me do that because it's affecting the United States of America. It's affecting Lao Beijing, old 100 names. If it's just a personal thing, nobody would care.
And this is all from Jin Wang, right? The same person that we think is 100% working for Chinese intelligence. This is essentially the case officer for Devin Archer, for James Bulger, and for Hunter Biden and everyone else associated, particularly Eric Schwerin, who they've got the hook in you, Eric, for such a small piece of change. The rest of them are making millions, brother.
Where's Brennan? Where's Comey? Where's Clapper? Where's all the guys trash-talking Trump for years about Russia? Russia's economy smaller than New York State. And this is a behemoth.
Here's one thing.
Funneling their cash back to the West to control us.
I want to mention, too, and Jin sends this one email. It says, Burnham/BHRSOE Reform Fund Call. As discussed on the call just now, below are the 3 carve-outs for Burnham's exclusivity in North America. Bally Asny Asset Management, that's spelled BALYASNY. Millennium, whoa, that's a big one, Steve.
Yep.
And then surprise, when we're dealing with this crew, the Joseph P. Kennedy Enterprises.
Okay, we're going to get more into that later. Be up. Jack on our Twitter feed's got a big story breaking here in the next hour. We got to get to Posobiec, but tell me about the audio.
Well, look, the real
Hunter Biden in his own voice.
Yeah, so there's two reasons we came at it from this angle. Number one, I'm still getting the nonsense pushback. And by the way, your friend Maggie Haberman even unfollowed me on Twitter, saying it's fake.
Maggie,
it's not real. It's Russian disinformation. All of this stuff. So let's hear Hunter in Hunter's own words. That's number one. Number
I think
two,
the New York Times is working on a story on that. Maggie.
Number
Come
two,
on.
let's hear what Hunter has
Come on,
to say.
baby.
Because here's the thing, the financial stuff is going to drag
Baby,
on
baby,
and
baby.
on and on. It's
Yes.
going to have to be long form investigations for years and years and years into this
No,
stuff.
I have one thing that doesn't have to be years and years because Wall Street should be paying attention.
All I'm saying is they'll make it
I know,
years
but this
and
is so clearly a fraud. What the SEC does when there's financial fraud, they do not wait because the monies of innocent people are at risk. The
Pension
SEC
funds,
can
pension
go
funds.
to a federal judge and shut down every bank account
He's right about that.
associated with this
Yeah.
in a minute.
Yeah, but they're going to.
Well,
They,
this is
they
what-
should.
this
And the
is
people who are involved with
But
Millennium
Jake
and
Clayton.
Joseph P.
But
Kennedy
that's
Associates
my
and
point.
all these others
we're
should call.
We're 7 days away from an election here, and the electorate needs to know about a lot of the nepotism, corruption, and the compromise that the Bidens have opened themselves up to as a result of all of these deals. And I know Jack Posobiec's going to break some news here with us in a moment as well on that. Look, I agree with you. The financial stuff is the most damning stuff, and it's going to last forever.
Let's get Posobiec in
Yeah.
here so we can put the hook in him and keep him on for the next segment. Jack, what news? Tell us what news are you breaking here? And I know you're all over Philadelphia.
On the Philadelphia front, what we saw last night was very horrific scenes out of West Philadelphia, Cobbs Creek neighborhood. 12 police officers have ended up being hospitalized. One of them was run over by a truck in a pickup truck, an uplifted pickup truck that actually rammed into a line of police officers. It was a female sergeant. It's reported that she may have broken her leg. She's in the hospital in Philadelphia now. What we saw were riots, looting, arson attacks, explosive devices being used, set off, and there was an effectively speaking a war on police that's been declared there. It's open season. And yet the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, Democrat, has done nothing and said nothing about this. Here we are a week away from the election, and they are literally setting Philadelphia on fire. They're setting police cars on fire. They're attacking, and you can see in these videos, I don't know if you guys have the clips, but there's videos where there's a line of police officers that's being driven back, then the line breaks and they retreat because they actually can't stand up. The police scanner last night sounded like it was something out of Mogadishu or Ramadi, saying how we can't hold the line. We've lost 52nd Street. We've lost 52nd Street. I mean, this is not the kind of stuff
Jack,
that the Pennsylvania citizens want to hear.
Can we hold you over for the next segment? We just got to get to a 90-second commercial break.
let's do
Okay,
it.
Jack Posobiec, One American News, is going to join us next. We got breaking news with Posobiec, also more about Philadelphia, the riots there, the police riots, the riots against the police. We're going to take a short commercial break. Hashtag War and Pandemic in the live stream. Want to hear what you have to say. We got Miles Guo taking us out. Fight for Hong Kong.